Hello, Rotarians and guests. Welcome to Sync Lab Studios and the Rotary Club of Park Cities. I'm Barb Jeffries, this year's club president. I'd like to bring this meeting to order. If you're a guest watching today, I encourage you to go to our website, parkcitiesrotary.org. It's filled with great information. You can learn about our various service opportunities and see a list of our upcoming weekly speakers. If you share our mission, which is service above self, we encourage you to join us, and we'd love to have you as a member. We're going to now start our meeting with Ley Wagoner, who will say the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance and the national anthem. After Ley is complete, Mark Casher will be here, and he's going to talk to us about today's PCR Marketplace Advertiser. And then Kyle Marmillion. He will speak to us a little bit about our RCPC Foundation and all the good work that we're doing.
We are grateful for this virtual time together. Please pray with me. Dearest Creator, we gather weekly as Rotarians in fellowship, knowing that our time together, even virtually, gives us that sense of belonging that we, as people who take seriously the words service above self, need in order to do just that, serve others. At this craziest of times in our world, we know that our purpose is still there, and we will find new ways to involve our interests. How grateful we are that we have such remarkable speakers that bring insights to us, people like Victor Vescovo, who has gone to the highest summits and deepest depths on our earth. We know we have a lot to learn about our earth and how best to take care of it. Please be with us all as we journey together and as we journey separately. And hopefully we will have some fun along the way. Amen. And now we will recite our Pledge of Allegiance, which will be followed by a national anthem. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. As a quick reminder, we've got a few spots available for advertisers, so if anybody is interested, please contact me. Today's spotlight advertiser is Karen Ferris with Roche, Howard, Smith & Barton. They're an independent insurance broker providing business insurance and risk management solutions to companies of all sizes and personal insurance to individuals and families. They have specialty expertise in technology, manufacturing, public entities, healthcare, directors and officers liability, and insuring high net worth individuals. It's one of the largest independently owned brokerage firms in Texas. It's 70 years old and has offices in Dallas and Fort Worth, 65 plus employees, and represents over 50 insurance companies. Their unique value proposition is that while they are independently owned, they're also part of Assurex Global, the largest privately held brokerage network in the world, allowing them to provide insurance and risk management to 5,000 plus clients throughout the world. Leroy Howard, a former member of the club, is one of the founding partners, and Karen Ferris, past president, served as CEO for many years, and today she serves as chair of the foundation. So please join me in thanking Karen Ferris of Roche, Howard, Smith & Barton. Thanks, Karen.
Hi, everybody, and happy Friday. I hope you're having a great start to your August and are ready for a great weekend. Thank you for the opportunity to give you an update on the Rotary Club Park Cities Foundation. club's own foundation was established in the 1960s, and the Communities Foundation of Texas is responsible for the foundation's assets. The spending policy for determining the amount available for grants each year is determined at the end of the fiscal year based on the fund's performance. In July last year, this amount was just north of $65,000. The monies fulfilled grant requests from the Salvation Army, Dudes in Attire, Metro Dallas Homeless Alliance, North Texas Food Bank, Agape Clinic, Dentistry with a Heart, 2 scholarships at Hillcrest High School, our Interact Club at Hillcrest High School, and the Future Medical Clinic at Bonton. The current fund balance is $1.4 million. The amount available to grant this year will be announced at the August Club Foundation Executive Committee meeting. All club members are encouraged to donate $100 a year to our foundation. You are able to mail checks payable to the RCPC Foundation, or you are able to donate via credit card online on our website. As a reminder, all of the club's August birthdays will be displayed on the screen, and we encourage you to make your $100 donation during the month of your birthday. There are 11 members with birthdays, generating $1,100 in potential fund contributions. In addition to this ask, please join me in supporting the inaugural RCPC Member Match for Our Ages campaign, where we are asking each to donate $2 a year for each year they have been alive. After you calculate your age match, we ask that you consider rounding that number to the nearest 100. This is going to be exciting as we calculate our unique ages and match, and we are projecting match numbers all over the board. Finally, we also encourage you to become a Frank Monroe Fellow by donating $750 or more this year to or you can donate that $750 in someone's honor. We will recognize you with a bronze medallion at the $750 level, a silver medallion at the $1,500 level, and a gold medallion at the $2,500 level. Thank you all for your incredible generosity over the years. We continue our fund because of the generosity of you. I've written my check for this year, and I hope that you will join me in support of the foundation as well. This is an excellent opportunity, and we are making a difference in our community. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your Friday, and remember to make your contribution.
We're going to start with a few announcements before we get to today's guest speaker. Members, please go to our website, parkcitiesrotary.org, and make your selections for this year's volunteer service opportunities. There are 36 different ways to provide service, either to our community or to our club. Look under the Info tab at the top of the page and select Choose Your 2020-21 Team here. Then complete the online form to make your selections. You can also just enter rcpcteams.com in your search engine. While many of these options may or may not happen this year, the team members need to be in place, so we'll be ready to adapt as needed. Just like Sarah and Dustin did this year when they quickly changed from the 4th of July parade to the 4th of July celebration. And what a success that was. Speaking of service, you're probably wondering, what can I be doing now to scratch that itch for service? One opportunity that has started up is Meals on Wheels, a once-a-month commitment, and it takes about an hour. Our route is near White Rock Lake. You can contact Jim Weichel at his email address to volunteer. I encourage you to sign up with a Rotary buddy or a family member. It's fun to run the route together, and you have someone to spot you if either of you can't make it for some reason. I've been doing this for years with Barbara Clark, and we both enjoy the service and fellowship. If you're interested, please know that either Jim or I will be happy to train you and run your first route. A second way is to provide lunch for Agape Clinic staff by donating $50 to cover the cost on a Thursday. Mail your checks made payable to RCPC for $50 to Fred Brown. He will coordinate the date, place the order from one of their favorite nearby restaurants, and get it delivered. Please give him a call if you'd like to help. Another opportunity will be starting very soon. Ley Wagoner and Stan Wright are in contact with North Texas Food Bank. They're gearing up to begin socially distanced food packing days again. Stay tuned in the next month or so for more information as that takes shape. And there's always making financial donations to either of our two foundations. Both can be made online at our website. As you just heard from Mark Kasher, there are several spots still available for marketplace advertisers. The annual cost is $350 and the benefits are priceless. Contact Mark to get your business started on the Rotary publicity bandwagon. Help wanted. We are looking for club members to join a new task force that's going to be led by Mark Neese to assess the effectiveness and timeliness of our social media presence. This is increasingly more and more important during this time since we can't be in contact in person. As you heard from our newest member, Austin Little, he found us by doing a Google search. It highlights the need for a dynamic and current Park Cities Rotary presence on all the platforms like LinkedIn and Instagram, Facebook, and others. Please reach out to Mark at his email address if you're interested in joining this important effort. The club now has a Zoom account. It's to be used for Rotary business. We're looking for a member to be our Zoom czar, to provide a general policy, oversight, and guidance on all things Zoom. Please contact me if you're willing to step into this leadership role. We all need to continue to search for ways to share our club's mission with potential new members. I encourage you to copy and paste the YouTube link you receive in Thursday's announcements from Chris McNeil with your friends, your family, and social media contacts. You can share general information about Rotary and our club, plus give them the opportunity to hear from these accomplished speakers each Friday. We also really would like for you to remember our friends at Maggiano's Little Italy for your next to-go orders or gift cards. We miss them and they miss us. Zach, the manager, is patiently waiting and holding our meeting space for us until we can start to return again on Fridays. The program committee is actively looking for speakers for our Friday meetings. If you have suggestions, please contact Jeff Sheehan. Due to the caliber of speakers, it often requires booking them months in advance. We are now starting to book for January through June next year. And lastly, please join us at upcoming Friday noon meetings, which will continue to be live streamed on our YouTube channel. The link is on our homepage. We're really looking forward to next week, August 14th, when we'll have new member speeches, which will be hosted by Marcia Zeidel and Lisa Amesbury, plus an update on our medical clinic at Bonton Farms project given by Karen Ferris. August 21st will be Deborah Van Storch. Her topic is what distinguishes a successful company from a failure. The program chair of that day is Jeff Brady. And now, here's Cleve Clinton, joined by Matt Lipton, to talk with today's guest speaker. We welcome Victor Vescovo.
Partner Matthew Lupton. Matthew and I were sitting around talking at a meeting in the office several months ago, and he mentioned that one of his best friends is Victor Vescovo. And I went, okay, tell me a little bit more about Victor Vescovo. Well, little did I know that within probably a couple of weeks of that point, there would be a full-page spread in the Dallas Morning News. For those of you who may not have heard about Victor Vescovo, a couple of fun facts that Victor shared with me earlier today really get my attention. First, there are 5 oceans in the world. Of the 5, Victor and his team have been to the bottom of 4 of them.
All 5.
All 5, all 5. Update to Wikipedia, all 5. Of the mountains on the 7 continents in the world, there are 7 continents. Of the 7 continents, the highest mountain, Victor's been on every one of the mountains, the highest mountains on the 7 continents. Then he said, he was talking to the Guinness Book of World Records, and there's something like 4 corners. Now, let me see if I can get this straight. He's been to the highest mountain, the lowest point in the earth, the North Pole skied in, and the South Pole skied in. So, for those of you old enough to remember Star Trek and William Shatner, William Shatner and Captain Kirk famously would say, "Space, the last frontier, boldly going where no man has gone before." I would challenge William Shatner to have a look with and compare himself against Victor Vescovo. He is the man. But for a better introduction of Mr. Vescovo, other than all of his incredible feats, at least from my perspective, let me pass you off to Matthew Lupton, who's going to give you some better background ideas.
Thanks, Cleve, and welcome everyone. It's my great pleasure to introduce my dear friend, Victor Vescovo. Victor and I go back a lot more years than I'm willing to admit to, honestly, but he was born and raised in Dallas. We actually met at St. Mark's, and when he graduated there, he went to the West Coast, did his undergraduate at Stanford, followed by a master's at MIT, and then an MBA at Harvard. So, incredible background. He then actually got into business and ultimately ended up founding a private equity fund here in town, Insight Equity. Very, very successful on that front. That was around 2000, so I guess it's been almost 20 years. Pretty crazy. But in addition, a naval officer who specialized in naval intelligence, served his country repeatedly, including multiple deployments, especially with respect to terrorism. And then obviously, as Cleve just mentioned, his incredible background in adventure, which is I've followed for years, and he and I have really enjoyed having discussion. When he finished the 2 poles, the trips skiing to the poles, the question was, what's next? I personally thought it was going to be space. And about 5 years ago, he called me and arranged a dinner. He said, "I know what I'm going to do." And I said, "Well, what's it going to be?" And he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Space." And he said, "No, the ocean." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" And then he kind of laid out the plan for what you're about to see, which has been just an incredible journey, especially over the last couple of years. So with that said, it's my great pleasure to introduce Victor Vescovo.
Thank you very much, Matt Cleve. Really appreciate it, and I appreciate your time. So I've got a presentation here. I'm going to go through it pretty rapidly because people, I think, can assimilate information pretty quickly. But this is about the 5 Deeps expeditions, we called it, which was the mission that we undertook last year to go to the bottom of all 5 of the world's oceans. And 4 of them had never been visited before or even identified. So without further ado, I'd like to start this off by basically saying something from Arthur C. Clarke, the science fiction author, who said, how inappropriate to call this planet Earth when it is clearly ocean. And there's an image of the Pacific Ocean. And 70% of our planet is actually ocean. And 80 to 90% of it is still completely unexplored. So it's an amazing exploration challenge that I wanted to become more involved with. There's a lot of things that go into actually trying to go to the bottom of all 5 oceans on the world, and these are some of them. The submarine, the support ship, actually doing the expedition, science, filming it, and all that, and I'll go through those pretty quickly. So more importantly, why do this? And there are 3 major components. One is just for the adventure of doing it. I personally subscribe to a philosophy that, we're here on this earth for a very short period of time. I'm acutely aware of that after almost getting killed when I was 3 in a car accident. But I've always strived to do things that are a little bit on the edge of the envelope. And maybe it's how I was brought up, or maybe it's genetics, but that's where I come from. There's a technical challenge. No one had ever built a submersible that could be reused and go down to the bottom of the ocean multiple times. There'd been 2 visits to the bottom of the ocean, one in 1960 by the US Navy and once by James Cameron in 2012, and neither sub ever did it again. And so it was a big technological challenge that I thought was a pretty meaty thing to get into, to try and build a submarine that could hold 2 people, that could go up and down repeatedly. And then there was the science. We were going places that no human being had ever been before. So with every dive, we usually found a new species, and we're certainly mapping and discovering things that no one had ever seen before. So it was an amazing experience to truly be an explorer in the modern age with modern technology. What did you need to have to do this? Well, you needed an FOD, or full ocean depth submersible, that could go 7 miles below the surface of the ocean, or almost 11,000 meters, where the pressure is 8 tons per square inch. It's like having an elephant on your fingernail everywhere on the sub. You need a support ship and landers that go down with you to provide navigation and filming capability on the bottom. Sonar to actually identify where the deepest points of the ocean are, because they had never really been identified. You needed a team to do all this. I ended up assembling a team of over 100 people all over the world to build and support the expedition. And then funding. That was, in some respects, not the easiest, but the more straightforward, because I just paid for all of it myself. The organization, it was extensive. And I used every ounce of business training and experience I had to put together a worldwide organization that could cover all of these different aspects. And Matt was my general counsel, and so I really appreciated him running all the legal issues and taking a lot of abuse that I personally didn't want to take. But that's what good lawyers do, right? Why us? Well, I certainly believe and have learned in my life, government can't do everything. And since they can't, if it's not going to be us and my team, who? You can't go through life constantly saying someone else should do something, or why doesn't someone else do this or that? There are certain points of time where you have to say, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take the responsibility and take the risks and write the checks to do something that I think needs to be done. And this was my thing. And life is short, as I mentioned earlier. So I believe we all have a responsibility to make it count as much as possible. Okay, so we talked about the reason. Now let's talk about, whoops, those should go more quickly. Let's talk about the sub. It was drawn on a paper napkin by the chief designer, an Englishman named John Ramsey, who's a prodigy. And it looks like a big stuffed pillow to most people, but it's streamlined to go up and down in the water very efficiently, because when it gets to the bottom, it doesn't need to move forward or sideways very fast, because we're just looking at things. So these were the key elements: buoyancy system and a titanium sphere 90 millimeters thick that actually kept all that pressure away from us. This is looking forward. There are batteries. It's all electrically powered. It's not tethered. So we were able to completely move around anywhere we wanted to go. The biggest danger to the submarine, as you can see on the edges, the propellers could get entangled by cables or other things that are unexpected. That's very rare in the open ocean. But when we took it to the Titanic, that was actually a serious hazard, and that made for a pretty white knuckle series of dives. Okay. So you start off with a titanium ball, about a meter and a half wide, 90 millimeters thick, 3 viewports, and bolted together to be a almost perfect sphere to keep that pressure out, and then 1 hatch on top. And then you add the foam around the titanium, and this is something very special called syntactic foam, which doesn't compress under extreme loads, but actually is buoyant in water. So you need a lot of that to hold the titanium pressure vessel up. And so it's basically a counterweight system. And then you can see there's a manipulator claw, so we can grab rocks and things from the bottom, the thrusters that allow it to move forward, backward, and in any direction, cameras so we can see what's going on. And then on the bottom, you actually have the weights that allow the submarine to go down when it's fully loaded, and then to go up, I drop the weights. Then on top, we have communications devices so we can talk to the surface. And we have, GPS so they know where we are when we come up, and all those wonderful things. Here's a video, actually, of the titanium hemisphere being forged in Wisconsin. So let's see if that can play. Let's go. Is it playing?
Yeah.
Okay, and that was how we created the titanium sphere, 2 of those, and then machined them into perfect spheres and then got it going. Other things we had to build test chambers, because you can't just go and ask someone, hey, do you have pressure test chambers for testing components to go down to 14,000 meters? We had to build our own, and that took a lot of time and effort, but we did that so we could test everything so it wouldn't implode when I went down there. So in terms of safety, people asked, do you get decompression sickness or anything like that? The answer is no. It stays at a constant 1 atmosphere. And we went from 1 atmosphere at the surface to 1,100 atmospheres at the bottom of the ocean. But that pressure vessel kept us safe the whole time, and we've now done it to that kind of depth about 12 or 14 times. We could be 4 hours away from the surface, and probably the scariest moment we had was when we were testing the submarine. We were at 5,000 meters, or about 7,000 psi, and we actually had some smoke in the actual pressure vessel. There was a circuit breaker that went off that didn't go correctly. It was only very temporary, but it certainly got your temperature up a lot because we were about 2 hours from the surface. So we took care of business, came back up, and that never happened again, thankfully. So we had to have a lot of safety systems on board to make sure that we could come home. Emergency oxygen supply, any number of things to prevent us from risking our lives too much. So what's next? The support ship. Well, we needed a 240-foot ship that's a former U.S. Navy vessel. It used to be used by the Navy to actually hunt Russian submarines. And then it was retired, and I bought it out of salvage. And now it is used to support submarines. And the nice thing about that is that it's extremely quiet. So whether it was hunting submarines or talking to my sub, it's very quiet and able to do that. It's not very fast, but she's very durable. She can go to the polar regions, so it can take the sub anywhere in the world. This is what she looked like before and then after. If any of you are thinking about purchasing a vessel and refitting it, I have one piece of advice: don't. It's extremely expensive, much more than you ever think, and it's a terrible industry to work in. But some things have to get done, like refurbishing the back of the ship that looked terrible before, and then after, we put on a hangar for the submarine, and it all worked out. Bring your checkbook. We took it all over the world. We took it to the Southern Ocean off the coast of Antarctica, and then we took it all the way up to the Arctic off the coast of Iceland, and then every point in between. The expedition itself was quite a tour de force. No one had ever done this before. No government had ever even attempted this before. But we did go around the world and to the top and bottom in 10 months with unpredictable weather, and we actually had to make 93 different itineraries because of constant changes from weather, permitting, mechanical issues, you name it. But you have to be adaptable in this life. This was the actual map. We started in the Atlantic Ocean. We were the first persons to down the bottom of the Atlantic. And then that was actually my first solo dive. It was to 8,000 meters, but we did that. Then we went down to the Southern Ocean, a very, very hostile part of the globe. And now we know why people don't go down there much, but we dove to the bottom of the Southern Ocean. Then we went over to the Indian Ocean. We actually identified the deepest point there. And then we went to the Mariana Trench, the deepest point in the ocean. And we dove that not just once, but 4 times, which had never been done before. The Tonga Trench in the Southern Pacific, there was a rumor that it might be deeper than the Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench. So we had to go down there. We went down there and I did a solo dive on the Tonga Trench, and it turned out to be 110 meters shallower than the Challenger Deep. So it was close, but that was punctuated by a battery fire I had outside the submarine, which wasn't fun, but we dealt with that and came back up safely. Then we had one more dive to go, which was at the bottom of the Arctic Ocean up there on the top of the screen. And on the way, we went right by the Titanic. So we said, we got to do that. So we dove the Titanic 5 times. First time that had been done in 14 years. And I got to do the first solo dive of the Titanic, which was an eerie experience, but really, really worthwhile. So we finished up by diving the Arctic, and then we docked in London and presented our findings to the Royal Geographic Society. So an incredible adventure. This will be a Discovery Channel 5-part series. It's been produced. It's ready to go. We're just waiting for them to decide when to air it. And there already is a special on our dives to the Titanic on the National Geographic Channel, so you can find that actually online. You can watch the 1-hour episode about our expedition there. The sonar and mapping, I'll go through this quickly, but no one knew where the bottom of the 5 oceans were, so we had to invest several $million building and installing the most advanced sonar system on a civilian vessel currently. And we mapped the ocean floor, and this is what it looks like when you do that. It helps you identify where to take the submarine. Just as kind of a side thing, we ended up mapping 5 major trench areas. That number is inaccurate. We've now mapped over 1 million square kilometers of new seafloor, which had never been done before, which is really cool. And we found 130 new seafloor features. So as an explorer, I get to name them, which is kind of fun. I can't name them anything. I can't name them after my dog. There are certain conventions I have to follow, but I mean, that's a lot. So we're adding more and more. So that's kind of a fun part of the expedition, naming things. The science. We actually try to do as much science as possible, collecting rock samples. We collected water data for climate studies. And we were the first expedition in history to be able to go to all 5 oceans, collect the entire water column of data, do it all in the same year with the same instruments and the same scientists. So that allows for the creation of a baseline for the oceans that had never existed before, which for climate modeling and other scientific endeavors is very, very useful. We brought down 3 landers on virtually every dive, and these guys would go down, they'd sit on the bottom, but they acted as navigation beacons. We would collect rock and other samples with them, biological samples of fish and other wildlife, and they would also videotape the submarine, which you'll see on the special. Some of the wildlife that we saw, we actually were the first ones to get a picture of a Dumbo octopus, which you see there at the deepest depth ever recorded, 2,000 meters deeper than anyone thought they could go. We also saw that is actually called the robust ass fish in the middle. It is the most common fish in the ocean, we are pretty sure we've determined, because he came up everywhere. Everywhere we went, there was another robust ass fish. I just like saying that. And of course, a lot of arthropods and other things, but that is its actual name. It's not a joke. And then here's an example of the Mariana Trench, the deepest trench in the world, and this is what we were able to do when we actually dove down deep into it and get a good 3D image there. One thing we also saw in the Mariana Trench, which was extraordinary, was this clip. It's kind of faint, you can't see it, but it drifted across the camera of, whoops, that didn't work, but it drifted across the camera of one of our landers. Unfortunately, we can't see it too well, but we actually saw something that looked like a double helix colony of microorganisms that no one had ever seen at that depth before, 8,000 meters. Which really had the scientists scratching their heads. But this is really why we're doing this in many respects, which is, as Cleve said, to boldly go where no one's gone before and see things no one has seen before. It's like outer space exploration, but here on our own planet. We found we retrieved the deepest rock ever recovered from the Mariana Trench, and we actually found a microscopic life on and even inside the rock, which they had never seen before. So again, more contributions to science. The filming, we were able to do some good filming. We saw this bizarre creature. Let's see if it comes up live here. So it's actually playing, but we weren't sure what in the heck this was when it came across the video, but it appears to be a version of a stalked ascidian that drifted right across. We actually nicknamed it Snoop Dog because it kind of looks like a dog's head, but we're convinced that's a new species and we have no idea why it's moving. No one ever expected them to move like this, so that was kind of cool to see. And then this is an example of what the sub looks like when it actually takes off from the bottom. You know, I've got my bright lights, but it slowly ascends through these incredible canyons in the ocean floor. Good animation there. Okay, go to the next slide. Sorry about that, gentlemen, ladies. So what we've done recently and what's next, as I mentioned, we went by the Titanic. That's a tip of the hat to James Cameron and all of his activities there. This is what the actual bow of the Titanic looked like on my sonar in my sub. That was my first image that, holy cow, I'm actually at the Titanic. And here are the first 4K images of the Titanic when we dove it. No one had ever taken a 4K camera down there before. Even Cameron hadn't done that, so sorry, Jim. And then we tooled around there for a while. That's the stern of the vessel, which was just like a war zone. Very dangerous, because you can see the steel beams just sticking out of the wreck. And when you're in a submersible, especially when you were piloting it by yourself, like I was, it was very unclear exactly what was around you. And there was entanglement and other hazards that I was kind of glad when that dive was over. We got some great footage, though. We actually helped the French Navy go down for the first time with a manned dive to a wreck submarine that happened in 1960, and they didn't actually know why it went down. So I actually took a French admiral down and we spent a couple of hours at the wreck, and now we're pretty sure what happened to it. And we actually think that it was run over by a container ship because we could see the bent metal from what you see there, which was the conning tower of the sub, and all the sailors lost their lives, unfortunately. And then I was actually able to take down the son of the captain of the submarine so we could actually see where his father perished. That was a pretty special moment. Other things we did, that's the Admiral when we dove the wreck of the Minerve, the submarine that went down. That was pretty cool. And there's the conning tower, and you can see the bent areas of the top of the conning tower that we believe got run over. So we helped solve a mystery. And that's where we actually laid a plaque dedicated to the members of the French Navy that died there. So these are some of the things we can do with a submarine that simply aren't able to do before. That's Prince Albert of Monaco to my right. He wanted to go down in the sub, and so we went down to the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, which is in his backyard of Monaco. So that was fun. He's a great guy. You know, once he closed the hatch, he said, you know, in here, you can call me Al, which I thought was pretty funny. But there's the Calypso Deep. Not that dramatic, but it was fun to go down with him for a while. We saw a lot of garbage, unfortunately, at the bottom of Calypso Deep. So a lot of scientists are actually using this video to actually try and estimate how much garbage there is down there, so we can try and put some measures in place to reduce that. And then we went to the Red Sea. No manned submersible had ever done deep diving in the Red Sea before, so we worked with the Saudi government and the university there, and we went to the deepest point in the Mediterranean. I'm sorry, in the Red Sea. And here you can see some of the bizarre things we saw, which were these like smokestacks made of rock that were seeping from the bottom out of these volcanic ridges, which were really cool. And then you can actually see some of the video that we took from the submersible. And this is us cruising along what is known as a brine lake. At the bottom of the Red Sea, it's so thick with salt that you actually have underwater lakes of salt water that you can cruise above. It was just extraordinary. It doesn't really exist like that anywhere else in the world, and no manned submersible had ever been there. So you can almost see an underwater seashore. But these are just extraordinary moments that I've been able to participate in by doing these things. We won't go through too many more of these, but you can see these are parts of the bottom of the Red Sea that no one had ever seen before. Okay, and we'll keep forwarding through here. And now what we did this year, we had to truncate a little bit because of COVID-19, but I think you're seeing on your screen a map of what we were planning to do this year, the so-called Ring of Fire expedition, where we went back to the Mariana Trench. We actually dove it 6 more times this year. It was incredibly difficult to get it underway because of COVID-19, but we did what we had to do without going into the details. I took the first woman down to the bottom of the ocean, Dr. Kathy Sullivan, who's also the first astronaut, so that was pretty cool. Also took down the son of the first person to go down the Mariana Trench, Kelly Walsh, whose dad was Don Walsh, who went down the Trieste in 1960. And I also took down the first Taiwanese citizen, so I wanted us to kind of do that before mainland China ever got the ability to do it. So that was kind of fun to do in a political sense. And I took some other people as well. So we mapped the heck out of the Challenger Deep, and then we did a lot of science in the Northern Mariana Trench. And later, well, actually in early 2021, we're going to go back to the Philippines that you can see on the left side of the screen, where we're going to try and make the deepest wreck dive that exists on the ocean floor at the USS Johnson from World War II, as well as do some more scientific investigation. So where from here? Like I said, the deepest wreck maybe. We're going to do more mapping, more science, and yeah, I'd still like to go into space. So hopefully Virgin Galactic or SpaceX or those guys are going to let me buy a ticket, and I can scratch that off the list. Never stop thinking about what you can do next. The lessons that I learned on this incredible journey that we're still underway is that, you know, inspire your kids to do things that my parents did, and look what happened. I'm sure I tortured them for most of my life, but I've been able to do some amazing things. If it doesn't violate the law of physics, very little is truly impossible. It's just harder, and that's something I think all of us can live by. And just keep working the problems. I cannot tell you how many problems we had trying to get this done, but you just work it. You know, and again, if it's not impossible, and if you have a big enough checkbook, yeah, you can solve most problems. And really what it comes down to, though, is that the team and the people are the difference. People like Matt, the people you see here from my crew, they actually did the heavy lifting. And I was more the organizer and the impetus behind a lot of it, but it comes down to the people in your organization. So that basically is it. And hopefully that was rapid enough and gave you a good taste for the expedition.
Wow. Wow. Boldly going is hardly, is almost an understatement. It hardly specifies, hardly describes, man, I'm blown away. I probably have more questions that I'm going to be able to ask, because I can only imagine that there are a lot of folks who've got a bunch of questions as well. But I'm going to lead off with at least one, maybe two. And that is, talk to me about what made the Southern Ocean so hostile.
The Southern Ocean's in a very unique place geographically. If you look at a map of the world, there's no landmass that goes around about 60 degrees south latitude. So storm systems develop, and then it's like a merry-go-round. They just go around the world constantly. No landmass ever interferes with them, so they never lose their strength. So the sailors nickname it the Screaming 60s, because especially during winter, it's just a ferocious place to go.
So above the surface of the water, it's very difficult for your support ship, but under the surface, it's not it's much the same as other oceans?
Oh yeah, after 50 meters, you can't even tell what's going up. But the Southern Ocean was dangerous. We were there for almost 3 weeks, and we were only able to do one dive. We attempted a second dive, and the sea conditions were so bad that the ship started rocking, and the submarine actually collided with the ship and sheared off part of the submarine, and we actually had to abort the dive, of course, et cetera. So we were very happy to get out of that place. In fact, there's a book coming out in December about the 5 Deeps expedition. You can find it on Amazon. It's called Expedition Deep Ocean. And the chapter about when we were in the Southern Ocean, we titled it, Here Be Monsters, because that's what it felt like.
Okay, well, I know that the teletype boards are just clamoring with questions. So, Barb, what's the first question?
First question is, ask him about ocean pollution. How bad is it, and what seems to be the best technology or method to remove it?
Unfortunately, what you cannot see is the most dangerous thing about pollution in the ocean. Seeing the visible thing is what gets people really emotional about it, but those break down in the ocean. And we've now discovered in every major trench, in the amphipods or other marine life, they've ingested microscopic plastic pollutants, which enter the food chain. That's the real danger. But there is pollution in every major trench, more or less, depending on where you are. We didn't see any in the Southern Ocean or the Arctic Ocean, but the microplastics were there. But the solution is, quite frank, simple, which is we cannot allow plastic to get in the ocean in the first place. Once the plastic is in the ocean, that's it. It's not coming out. All the unfortunate things that I've seen of people trying to go into the ocean and scrape it off or collect it, that's like trying to put out a house fire with a glass of water. It simply cannot get in the ocean because it will immediately start to break down, enter the food chain. So any measures we have to do, even land filling plastic, is better than letting it anywhere near a seashore. That's been my conclusion.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Okay, Barb.
Next one from Jeff Brady is, what size was Snoop Dogg?
Jeff, Snoop Dogg was, his head was about this big, about the size of a basketball. So bigger than we expected, and certainly bigger than anything we expected to see at 8,000 meters or 24,000 feet under that incredible pressure. But most of that species that look like that, you saw that tether, they're anchored. So they're born, they're anchored, and then they just sift through the water to get nutrition. This one was mobile. And the scientists are puzzling, like, did it choose to be mobile? Was it able to let go and move or not? They're still not sure. If so, that'd be the first movable, that type of species that we've seen before. And so we were just very fortunate that we saw it on camera. And it actually had a small child at the bottom. That little clump you saw at the bottom was actually a child that was carrying along. So just a fascinating creature.
Okay, so I want to know, what was eerie about the Titanic for you?
The eeriest thing that happened to me on the Titanic was when I first got to it, I didn't even realize I was in front of the Titanic because it was black. It's black on the bottom and the ocean's very dark. And it wasn't until I started rising that I saw the portals. And it's just a huge, huge wreck. It's not going to vanish in 10 or 20 years like the media says. I think they do that to be sensationalist. It is massive. It will be there for 100, 200 years. Parts of it might collapse, but it's going to be there. But as I was rising up and going across laterally, the lights from my submersible actually reflected inside the wreck. So it looked like there were lights inside the wreck, which was kind of unnerving and spooky. But that was kind of cool. But to be quite honest, there are no human remains. You don't even really see clothes. It's like a big empty warehouse. It's just void of life. So it's more just like a relic. But the most dangerous thing were the cables from the lifeboats or the wires. Those were kind of just floating around. And those are things you don't really want entangled in the sub, because Cameron always dove with 2 submarines. And there were documented instances where they actually impacted and they had to use the other sub to free the other one, et cetera. I was down there alone, so I had to be incredibly careful not to get entangled. Now, if I did, I could eject things off the submarine and make it back, et cetera. We had precautions for that, but it was a very interesting dive.
That's a little comforting. Okay, so you seem like a man with an incredible, vivid imagination. I mean, who could have imagined? Let's see, I'm gonna climb the highest mountain on 7 continents. I'm gonna go to the deepest part of the 5 oceans. Okay, so what's next on your imagination list of what you'd like to accomplish?
Well, I did mention I'd love to go into space, so I got to wait for that, wait for those tickets to become available. But one thing that we're planning on doing next year is that if you ask people what the tallest mountain in the world is, people automatically say Everest, which is true in one respect, that it's the highest above sea level. But the tallest mountain on our planet is actually Mauna Kea in Hawaii, from the base to the summit. And so actually no one's ever actually climbed Mauna Kea because no one's ever been able to get down to the base of it in the ocean. I thought, well, wait a second, I've got a submarine. Why don't I do that? So the idea is next year is to take the submersible and go down to the bottom, touch the bottom, float back up, and completely unpowered, get out of the submarine on the water, paddle the 20 miles to shore, and then actually climb the mountain. So it technically would be the first ascent of Mauna Kea in history. So that'd be fun. I mean, what else are you going to do on your summer vacation?
So imagination and fun kind of equate themselves for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're not going through this life just to live boring, sad lives. You got to have fun while you're doing things interesting. I mean, it's the intersection of science, of adventure, of personal gratification, and sharing it with other people. It's doing all these things together that I think is important for people to try and do in their lives.
Okay, I've been hogging you, but your best friend sitting beside me, I think, has at least a question. So here you go.
I do, and I know you've been asked this before, but I'm curious to know what was the scariest moment and what was the most exciting moment on the positive side.
The scariest moment, was when we were testing. I actually have a certification now, which is rare, which is I'm a submarine test pilot. I don't know if that's something you want, but I have that, and so when we actually did have that small puff of smoke inside a very small capsule at 5,000 meters, that was a little bit frightening. But we went through the measures to cut off the electrical power. We had our emergency gear ready. We would have gotten up fine, but that was definitely a bit of a scary moment. The most positive thing was actually getting, honestly, to the bottom of the ocean for the first time, because that was the culmination of, oh my God, it actually worked. And I'm still here, at least for now. And getting to that point, and when you get to that point, you're like, well, now we can dive anywhere, because we're now at the bottom. And that was just an incredibly satisfying, wonderful feeling. And I was like a little kid. I was there, I did the dive solo. So here I am in my own submarine at the bottom of the ocean. I was like a 5-year-old. So I got the stick shift, just started driving around. What can I see? This is cool. And then after 4 hours, I got hungry. I ate a tuna fish sandwich, and then I came back up.
Okay, so I think everybody is waiting to find out what is the most frequent question that you're asked.
Yeah, unbelievably, the most frequent question I get is, how do you go to the bathroom in the sub? Some of our missions can last 12 or 14 hours, so we actually have a regimen where you try not to eat or drink very much in the 6 hours before you do a major dive. And then, like any pilot, if there are any pilots out there, we actually have a bottle, to take care of ourselves if we need to. But it's not a big deal. If you get into high altitude mountaineering or deep sea exploration, norms of social interaction kind of go by the wayside. You do what you need to do.
Barb?
Victor, I have a question from past President Richard Stanford. Besides the smokestacks and the brine sea, any other surprising topological features you discovered in the deep, or you hope to discover? No,
we found something really cool in the Mariana Trench, which were something called bacterial mats. So there's no light down there, and yet we discovered microscopic life living on the rocks. And scientists, can call that chemosynthesis, et cetera, but these organisms are actually living off methane seeps coming out of the rock, and they get energy from other sources other than photosynthesis. So if there's life on other planets, it could actually evolve in that manner. And we actually found the physical evidence of it, not just in one remote place, but in a couple of places at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, which no one had ever been able to film before. We didn't just film it, I got to see it with my own eyes and describe it in different colors. There was gold, there were reds. It was just amazing. And we're now hoping next year to be able to retrieve an actual sample of these rocks. I actually had one in my claw of the submarine this year, but it was too big to fit in the container. And so talk about frustrating. So now we're redesigning it to make that possible. So seeing novel forms of life, that's what any explorer ever hopes to do, and we're able to do that on these expeditions.
Question? I do. So what was the biggest technological challenge you faced would be my first, and my second would be, was there ever a point when you were about to throw your hands up and just say, enough, it can't be done?
There are so many. Trying to develop a full ocean depth submersible that's capable of repeated dives was very, very difficult. And it wasn't just one thing, it was many things. There was the variable ballast system to make us perfectly balanced on the bottom, which gave us no end of issues. There were issues with the communication systems. The hatch actually leaked a little bit of water when we first started working the submarine until we figured out how to make a seal that could work just as well at 1 atmosphere on the surface as well as 1100 at the bottom, and then constantly do that up and down multiple times. It's not a trivial engineering issue. And then there's camera. You know, how do you build a camera that can suffer 8 tons per square inch of pressure and actually film just like it does on the surface? All of these individual things just together were just a massive amount. But you know, you put your head down and you just knock them out one by one. And that's what we did.
That's great. Question from Jeff. How long is each excursion?
It depends on the depth, of course. The submarine can go down about 2,500 meters per hour. So a full ocean depth dive to the bottom of the Mariana Trench takes 4 hours down. We would typically spend 2 to 4 hours on the bottom and then 4 hours to come up. So the longest missions we've ever done have been about 13 hours in the sub, maybe 14 with retrieval and all that type of thing. The submarine actually has life support for 4 days. That was a requirement by the certifying agency to make it commercially grade. And the funny thing was, we asked them why 4 days, and they said, well, based on our experience with other submersibles, we figured if you're ever trapped on the bottom, that's how long it would take for someone to come rescue you. We pointed out that nothing can come rescue us, and they said, just make it 4 days. But our shallower dives are, of course, you know, half that length, maybe 6 hours. The dive with Prince Albert at the bottom of the Mediterranean was about a 4-hour dive. So it just varies.
I have one more question here. What was your first big adventure? And secondly, at that time, did you even imagine that it would go to this extreme?
My first big adventure was kind of what I alluded to earlier, where I almost got killed when I was 3. I was in a car accident. Well, the reason I had a car accident was I was the one driving. So I was 3 years old and crawled into my parents' car and put it into gear and started driving it down a driveway, and it did not end well. And I ended up in the hospital for quite a long time, almost died and all that kind of thing. So that was my first big adventure, quite life-threatening and all that. So I guess I just carried that through for a long period of my life. And but that I've always been attracted to things that are a little bit risky, but I've always tried to do them in a way that's very calculated. The analogy I make, it's like a stunt person. You see the stunts that stunt men and women do, and those are very dangerous stunts, but they study the problem, they do the math, and they're trained to do it so that when it actually happens, the risk is actually much, much lower than it looks like. And so that's what I've tried to do with my expeditions, and I think that's probably why I'm still here. I've done some very risky things, but I've tried to do them in a way that mitigates as much risk as possible. And the 5 Deeps expedition was no exception to that. And I'm very fortunate that we had no major incidents of any kind regarding safety, my own or any member of my crew. And I am so proud of that as much as anything.
So if you were talking to a teenager or a child, a student, now facing the next semester, what would you want to tell them? What would you want them to hear that would kind of based on your life experiences?
Well, I guess part of that is the context of COVID-19, and I think it's very easy to get a little depressed or down because of all the restrictions, but this too will pass. COVID-19 will pass, just like the Spanish flu did, just like the plague did. We'll get through this. And life is not designed to be easy or comfortable. And it's a little bit of a wake-up call, not just for adults, but also for younger people, that life will throw you curveballs. But what you have to do is adapt and maintain a positive attitude and do what you can to advance yourself and have a positive attitude, not just for yourself, but for the people around you as well. And when you come out the other side, you're a stronger person, you'll have more character, and you'll have that scar that will help you get through other difficult parts of your life. That would be my advice.
Wow. So we've gone from master of continents and oceans to a master of really good advice for students as well. Very impressive. I tell you what, Victor, if the Rotary Club of Park Cities has had a better speaker, I'd like to know who it is. You've been awesome today. We are ever so grateful for your participation, for Mark Neese and Barb in making this possible. Moreover, for Matt in telling me about you and making this possible. I really, really have enjoyed hearing what you've done. I look forward to, now that I know more about you, I'll be tracking you for sure. And as is customary for the Rotary Club of Park Cities, we will be placing a book in your honor at Preston Hollow Elementary School. And we are...
It's right across from where I live.
Perfect. Well, I tell you what, we've done this for so long. Many of the books that are in the elementary school came from the Rotary Club of Park Cities, and we're very proud of that event. And, you know, you could almost imagine, Barb reminds me or tells me that the volume was turned down, and it strikes me that perhaps my wife Rita called Mark and said, you know, we've heard enough from Cleve. Let's just turn the volume down at the very beginning, and that way we won't have to put up with it. So let me give you a pitch one more time. The legacy of leadership, Rotary Club of Park City's legacy of leadership is getting ready to fire up again this year. It is a wonderful program. We've got incredible speakers from all walks of life, and we have the privilege of being able to do things a little differently this year. We've got Zoom is going to be available. Because of Zoom and all the fun things going on in the world, we are able to tell those of you who say, oh, I can't do it, I've got to get the kids wrangled off to school in the morning. Well, not only are they not going to school, at least for the first several weeks, but moreover, we're going to do it in the evening. So you're going to be able to go from 6:30 to 8 o'clock at night this year. No more excuses. And we'll have an application online for you to fill out. We encourage every one of you to go online, figure out where you can find it under Legacy of Leadership and fill out an application, especially you, Jeff Brady. We're expecting on getting an application from you if you're still listening. What else have we got to offer? We got four-way test, of course. How could I forget? And the good news is I believe I've prompted, certainly Matthew and maybe even Victor will join us in saying the four-way test mark of the things we think not on board yet. We're looking at okay, here we go. Okay, you guys can just move your mouths and act like you know what I'm saying. Of the things we think, say, and do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, is it beneficial to all concerned? And with that, I wish Matthew and Victor and I wish y'all to have a wonderful weekend, and Victor would say, don't give up.